Snow sealed the valley like wax on a coffin lid. Pinecrest Manor, black timber bones against white flesh, stood alone on the ridge, its chimneys exhaling the last warmth of a dying dynasty. At 11:47 p.m., the grandfather clock in the hall struck once, then froze. Upstairs in a locked study reeking of crushed pine needles and bitter almonds, Sir Archibald Pine clutched a crystal tumbler. His lips were blue, his eyes wide, accusing, stared at the single window. Frosted shut, latch bolted from within. Chapter 1. The Summons in the Snow. Snow fell in deliberate silence, each flake a white verdict upon the moor. The train from Paddington hissed to a halt at the tiny station of Pinecombe Junction, its brakes exhaling steam that froze mid-air like ghosts reluctant to depart. Hercule Poirot stepped down onto the platform with the precision of a man who disliked disorder in any form, especially meteorological. His patent leather shoes, impeccable despite the journey, left perfect half-moons in the fresh powder. A porter, red-nosed and shivering, touched his cap. "Mr. Poirot, sir? Inspector Japp's motor is waiting. Terrible business up at the manor." Poirot inclined his head, the famous mustaches bristling beneath the brim of his Homburg. "Terrible, yes, but also, one suspects, interesting." The motor car, a sturdy Wolseley with chains on the tires, lurked beside the station like a black beetle. Inspector Japp unfolded himself from the driver's seat, his bowler hat dusted with snow. His face, usually the color of rare roast beef, had gone the shade of underdone sweet. "Poirot, thank God. I've got a locked room, a dead baronet, and a house full of suspects who all swear they never left their beds. You'll sort it, won't you?" "Naturellement, but first the facts. Begin at the beginning, mon ami, and do not omit the temperature of the whiskey." Japp snorted, climbed back behind the wheel, and set the car crawling up the rutted lane toward Pinecrest Manor. The pines themselves began almost at once, ranks of Norwegian spruce planted in the 1880s by Sir Archibald's grandfather, their lower branches drooping under caps of snow like mourning veils. The road narrowed, branches scraped the roof with soft, malevolent fingers. "Sir Archibald Pine," Japp began, 70 years old, richer than Croesus in timber. Found dead in his study at 5 minutes past midnight. Door locked from the inside, key in the lock. Window bolted, no footprints in the snow beneath it. Cyanide in the whiskey decanter, smells of pine needles, which is apparently normal for the stuff he drank. No note, no struggle, just dead. Poirot listened, gloved fingers steepled beneath his chin. "And the household? 5 souls, plus staff. Niece Evelyn Pine, sole heir under the old will, though rumor says he was cutting her out. Sister Lydia Blackwood, widow bitter as sloes. Secretary Captain Reginald Thorne, limps from the Somme devoted to the estate. Dr. Gideon Shaw, family physician, been here 20 years. Parlor maid, Felicity Gray, 19, local girl, pretty in a frightened bird way. Cook and butler are below stairs, they heard nothing." The car breasted the final rise. Pinecrest Manor crouched against the sky. Black beams, white plaster, a single lit window glowing like a jaundiced eye. Chimneys exhaled pale smoke that the wind tore apart before it could rise. A constable stamped his feet by the front door, his breath plumed like a dragon's. Japp killed the engine. Clock in the hall stopped at 11:47. That's the last anyone admits to hearing it strike. Poirot stepped out, surveying the façade. "A house that keeps its own counsel. Bon, let us disturb it." Inside, the air was thick with resin and grief. A grandfather clock, ornate mahogany, face cracked, stood sentinel in the hall, its pendulum stilled. Poirot paused before it, noting the fracture. A starburst radiating from the Roman numeral 12, as though the clock itself had been struck in the face. He touched the glass. It was cold, but not with the chill of the night alone. Curious, he murmured. The blow came from within. Jap led him up the main staircase, boots creaking on oak. Portraits glared down, pines in periwigs, pines in armor, pines with shotguns and dead stags. At the landing, a draft sighed through a cracked window pane, carrying the scent of snow and something sharper, bitter almonds. The study door stood ajar. Yellow tape crisscrossed the frame, but the lock itself was intact, a heavy Yale key protruding. Poirot knelt, produced a magnifying glass the size of a saucer, and examined the keyhole. No scratches, no wax, no sign of tampering. "Parfait," he said softly. The door was locked by someone inside, or by someone who wished us to believe so. Beyond the tape, the room was a shrine to arboriculture. Maps of plantations covered the walls. Samples of bark were pinned like butterflies. A globe carved from a single burl of yew dominated one corner. In the center, a partner's desk of bird elm. Upon it, a crystal decanter, 3/4 full of amber liquid, a heavy cut-glass tumbler empty, and Sir Archibald Pine. He sat upright in a high-backed chair, head fallen forward, chin on chest. His dinner jacket was immaculate, the white tie still crisp. One hand rested on the desk blotter, the other clutched the tumbler, knuckles blanched. His lips were blue, the color of damsons left too long in frost. His eyes, wide, filmed, accusing, stared at the window opposite. Poirot approached with the reverence of a priest entering a crypt. He lifted the tumbler with a silk handkerchief. A faint green residue clung to the facets, iridescent as a beetle's wing. "Pine liqueur," Jap supplied. "Distilled on the estate. Sir Archibald took a nightcap every evening. 2 fingers scotch, 1 finger liqueur. Said it kept the lungs clear." Poirot sniffed delicately. Amygdalin. The scent of cyanide is unmistakable, yet masked ingeniously by the pine. One might almost say, considerate. He moved to the window. Heavy velvet curtains were drawn back. The casement was bolted top and bottom with brass fittings that gleamed. Outside, the snow lay in an unbroken quilt, drifting against the sill. No ledge, no ivy, no convenient drainpipe. 20 feet to the ground. "Impossible," Jap muttered. Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Improbable, mon ami. There is a difference. Tell me of the discovery." Parlourmaid, Felicity Gray, brought Sir Archibald his cocoa at 10 o'clock. He was alone, working. She left. At midnight, she returned to collect the tray. Door locked, knocked, no answer. Peered through the keyhole, saw him like that. Raised the alarm. Captain Thorne broke the door down. Key was in the lock on the inside. Poirot circled the desk. On the blotter, an open ledger, columns of figures in a neat copper plate. A fountain pen, green ink, lay uncapped. Beside it, a single pine needle, fresh, its tip glistening with sap. "Tiens," the tree enters the room. He lifted the needle with tweezers, slipped it into an envelope. And the whiskey decanter? Full when the maid left at 10. Empty when we arrived, except for the dregs in the tumbler. Poirot opened the decanter, swirled the contents. 3/4 full now. Someone refilled it after death. Why? Jap shrugged. To confuse the dose? No, to confuse the timeline. Poirot's gaze swept the room. Where is the key to the liqueur cabinet? A small door in the paneling stood ajar. Inside, crystal decanters, dustless, one space empty. A brass key lay on the shelf. Sir Archibald kept it on his watch chain, Jap said. Found it in his waistcoat pocket. Poirot examined the key, worn but no duplication marks. He locked and unlocked the cabinet thrice. The mechanism was smooth, silent. Footsteps in the corridor. A young woman appeared, tall auburn hair coiled beneath a black velvet beret. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her chin was high. Evelyn Pine. Monsieur Poirot. Her voice was low, controlled. You will find who did this? I will find the truth, mademoiselle. Whether it comforts or condemns remains to be seen. She glanced at her uncle's body and something flickered across her face. Grief, yes, but also calculation. He was rewriting his will, cutting everyone out, the estate, the trees, everything to a trust. Said the pines must outlive us all. Poirot's eyebrows rose. A noble sentiment, and inconvenient for an heiress. Color touched her cheeks. I loved him, but I won't pretend I didn't need the money. Captain Thorne limped in next, tall, sun-browned, a scar livid from temple to jaw. His eyes were the pale blue of glacier ice. Inspector, the men are ready to move the body. Poirot intercepted him. One moment, Capitaine. Your boots. Thorne glanced down. The leather was caked with dark pitch, fragrant even through the cyanide. Checked the boundary fence at 11:30, he said. Storm brought a tree down. Had to saw it clear. Alone? Always alone. A muscle jumped in his cheek. Sir Archibald trusted me with his trees, more than he trusted his own blood. Dr. Gideon Shaw followed, stooped, 60-ish, smelling of carbolic and despair. His hands trembled as he adjusted his pince-nez. Angina, he said without prompting. I warned him, the excitement of the new will. Excitement enough to poison himself? Poirot asked mildly. Shaw recoiled. Never. Sir Archibald was difficult, but not suicidal. Lydia Blackwood swept in last, leaning on a silver-headed cane. Her black bombazine rustled like dry leaves. My brother was a fool, she announced. Surrounded himself with parasites. Present company accepted, Doctor. Shaw flushed. Evelyn's lips thinned. Poirot surveyed them, the grieving niece, the loyal soldier, the bitter sister, the shaken physician, and somewhere the trembling parlor maid who had found the body. He returned to the desk, opened the ledger. The last entry dated yesterday, sale of North Plantation, $42,000, pending signature. Initialed R.T. Captain Thorne, Poirot said softly, you were selling the trees your master wished to preserve? Thorne's jaw set. He changed his mind, needed cash. The trust was a whim. Evelyn laughed, a brittle sound, a whim that disinherited me. Lydia's cane tapped. And me, though I'd have taken an axe to the lot myself. Poirot closed the ledger. Madame, messieurs, you present me with a banquet of motives. Greed, betrayal, preservation, revenge. But the door was locked, the window bolted, the snow untouched. Somewhere the truth hides in plain sight. He moved to the fireplace. The grate was cold, but a single log had been laid ready, spruce by the scent. On the hearthstone, a smear of green ink, still wet. Jap barked, Who's been in here? No one answered. Poirot knelt, touched the smear. The color of envy, he murmured. Or of pine needles crushed underfoot. He straightened, eyes gleaming. Inspector, have the clock removed to my room. I wish to examine its entrails, and the boots of every soul in this house. Every boot must be brought to me. We begin with symmetry. As the constable carried the clock past, its pendulum swung once, lazily. A single pine needle drifted from the mechanism, spinning down to land at Poirot's feet like a green accusation. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard sighed. Poirot smiled. The game, as they say, was afoot. Chapter 2. The Scent of Death. Poirot stood alone in the study, the door closed behind Jap with the finality of a coffin lid. Snow tapped the window like impatient fingers. The fire had been laid but not lit, and the air carried the chill of a mausoleum. He removed his gloves, flexed his small, precise hands, and began. First the tumbler. He held it to the electric bulb, still a novelty in this corner of Devon, and rotated it slowly. The green residue caught the light, opalescent, like oil on water. With a glass rod, he scraped a flake, transferred it to a square of filter paper, and folded it into an envelope marked Échantillon A. Then the decanter, heavier crystal faceted, stopper intact. He lifted it, sniffed, swirled. The liquid within was viscous, darker than scotch, with a resinous clarity. He poured a thimbleful into a clean beaker, stoppered the decanter, and set it aside. Next, the desk. The blotter was virgin except for the imprint of the tumbler's base and a faint circle where the decanter had stood. No ink, no scratches, no stray fibers. The ledger lay open to the page of the disputed sale. Poirot read the figures twice, lips moving silently. $42,000. A fortune in 1930s timber. He closed the book, slid it into a leather folio, and turned to the liqueur cabinet. The key turned sweetly. Inside, 4 decanters, port, brandy, sloe gin, and the missing pine liqueur. A space the exact width of the estate bottle. On the shelf beneath, a silver tray bearing a single glass smear, green again but drier. He photographed the tray with a pocket Kodak, then dusted the cabinet for prints. Only Sir Archibald's, thumb and forefinger on the key, a smudged palm on the door. No others. The window. He unbolted it, pushed it open. Snow sifted in, melting on the sill. 20 feet to the ground, straight drop onto a gravel path now buried under 6 inches of white. He leaned out, scanned left and right. Nothing. Closed and rebolted the window, noting the brass screws were tight, the paint undisturbed. The curtains, heavy brocade, hung straight, no creases to suggest recent handling. He knelt before the body. Sir Archibald's dinner jacket was buttoned, the white tie symmetrical. Poirot lifted the right hand, rigor beginning, and examined the nails. Clean, manicured, no skin beneath them. The left hand still gripped the tumbler. He eased the fingers apart. The glass was warm from the corpse's grip. He set it on the desk, then unbuttoned the waistcoat. Inside pocket, a gold watch stopped at 11:47. The crystal was cracked in a starburst identical to the hall clocks. He wound the stem. Nothing. The mechanism was jammed. "Tiens," he whispered. 2 clocks, 1 blow. He straightened the body gently, tilting the head back. The lips were cyanosed, the tongue protruding slightly, stained blue-green. A thread of saliva had dried at the corner of the mouth. Poirot produced a silver probe, parted the lips, and peered down the throat. No obstruction. He pressed gloved fingers beneath the jaw, rigor in the neck muscles but not advanced. Death between 11:30 and 12 hours, as Dr. Shaw had estimated. A soft knock. Felicity Gray entered, tray trembling in her hands. Cocoa pot, milk jug, sugar, the bowl untouched. I was to bring fresh cocoa, sir. Inspector Japp said I might. Poirot relieved her of the tray. You found him, ma petite? Yes, sir. Midnight, like always. Door was locked. I looked through the keyhole. Her voice cracked. He was just sitting there. I screamed. You screamed at midnight? 5 minutes past, sir. The hall clock had struck 12. I ran downstairs. Captain Thorne came with an axe. Poirot poured cocoa into a cup, sniffed. Plain, no almond scent. And last night, when you brought the 10 o'clock tray. Sir Archibald was writing. Said he didn't want to be disturbed again till morning. He locked the door after me. I heard the key turn. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You are certain? As God's my witness, sir. He dismissed her with a gentle pat on the shoulder, then turned to the fireplace. The single spruce log lay ready, its cut end oozing sap. He lifted it, light, dry, recently sawn. On the hearthstone, the green ink smear had begun to dry into a crust. He scraped it into another envelope. Échantillon B. The door opened again. Dr. Shaw entered, medical bag in hand. Inspector Japp thought you'd want my preliminary report. Poirot gestured to the body. Proceed, docteur, but touch nothing I have marked. Shaw opened his bag, produced a stethoscope, listened to the chest, routine though the heart had long since stopped. He examined the eyes, the mouth, the hands. Cyanide beyond doubt. Ingested. Onset rapid. 5 to 10 minutes. No injection marks. Stomach contents will confirm, but I'd wager the dose was in the whiskey. Poirot watched closely. You prescribed laudanum? For insomnia. 1 teaspoon in cocoa. Harmless. Shaw hesitated. He took it at 10. Yet the cocoa on the tray is cold, untouched. Shaw's pince-nez slipped. He changed his mind? Or someone changed it for him? Poirot indicated the decanter. This was refilled after death. Why? Shaw had no answer. Captain Thorne appeared in the doorway, boots leaving clumps of pitch on the rug. Men are ready to move, Sir Archibald. Coroner's van is here. Poirot held up a hand. 1 moment, Capitaine. Your boots. Thorne lifted a foot. The sole was thick with black resin, pine needles embedded in the tread. Fence line, like I told you, storm damage. At 11:30? Give or take. Poirot knelt, plucked a needle free. It was fresh, sap still tacky. This tree was felled tonight, yet the storm peaked at 9. Curious timing. Thorne's scar lividated. I don't answer to you, Poirot. Non, you answer to the truth. Poirot rose. Remove the boots. Both of them, they will be examined. Thorne hesitated, then sat on a stool and unlaced them. The left boot was damp inside, sweat or melted snow. Poirot sniffed, pine sharp and unmistakable. Jap bustled in with 2 constables. Body's going to the mortuary. Clock's in your room, Poirot. And, he lowered his voice, the maid says she saw a light in the old nursery at 11:30. Nursery's been locked since Miss Evelyn was a child. Poirot's mustaches twitched. Bon, we progress. As the constables lifted Sir Archibald, stiff, dignified even in death, Poirot noticed something glinting in the dead man's waistcoat pocket. He reached in with tweezers, a tiny brass key no longer than a matchstick. Not the liqueur cabinet key, not the watch key. Something else. He slipped it into his pocket just as Evelyn Pine appeared, cloak over her shoulders, snowflakes melting in her hair. Monsieur Poirot, the snow's stopped. Tracks to the pine plantation, fresh ones, leading away from the house. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Away, mademoiselle? Then someone left after midnight and returned before dawn. Or, he glanced at the window, the untouched snow beneath it. Or the tracks were made before the snow began to fall heavily. Timing, always timing. He turned to Jap. Seal the study. No one enters without me. And have the dogs brought from the kennels. We follow the tracks at first light. As he left the room, the scent of pine and bitter almonds clung to his coat like a confession yet unspoken. Behind him, the decanter gleamed on the desk. 3/4 full, patient, waiting. In the corridor, a floorboard creaked directly above his head. The nursery. Poirot looked up, smiled a small, terrible smile, and began to climb the stairs. Chapter 3. The will in the wallpaper dawn crept over Pinecrest Manor like a thief reluctant to show its hand. Gray light filtered through the study window, turning the snow outside to the color of old bone. Poirot had not slept. The hall clock lay dissected on his bed like a mechanical corpse, its brass innards gleaming under the bedside lamp. He had spent the night with a jeweler's screwdriver and infinite patience, coaxing secrets from its pendulum. Now, with the household stirring below, he returned to the death chamber, Jap trailing like a faithful bloodhound. Anything from the clock? Jap asked, stifling a yawn. Poirot tapped his pocket. Patience, mon ami. First, the wallpaper. He stood before the eastern wall where maps of timber plantations curled like the skins of ancient serpents. His fingers traced a seam between two panels, imperceptible to the untrained eye, but to Poirot as obvious as a lie. He pressed. A click sounded softer than a sigh. A section of wall swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a safe, black iron the size of a hat box, its dial worn smooth by decades of use. Jap whistled. Never saw that? Naturellement, it is designed for invisibility. Poirot spun the combination. 07-23-1890, Sir Archibald's birth date, gleaned from a framed photograph in the hall. The safe yielded a leather wallet, crisp as new money. Inside, a will executed yesterday, witnessed by Dr. Poirot, Shaw, and Captain Thorne. Poirot read aloud, his voice precise as a scalpel. I, Archibald Reginald Pine, being of sound mind, bequeath the entirety of my estate, Pinecrest Manor, plantations, and all assets, to the National Trust for Preservation in Perpetuity. No sale, no felling. The Pines shall stand eternal. Evelyn Pine receives $500 annually. All others, nothing. Jap's eyebrows vanished into his hatband. Blimey, cuts the niece out cold. And the loyal secretary and the devoted sister. Poirot refolded the document. Ink fresh, still tacky at the edges, signed after supper. Who was with him? As if summoned, Evelyn Pine appeared in the doorway, her face pale as skimmed milk. Monsieur Poirot, you found it? He held up the will. Oui, mademoiselle. A document that rewrites fortunes and motives. She crossed to the desk, sank into her uncle's chair. He threatened it for weeks, said the developers were circling like vultures. A motorway through the North Plantation, 100,000 he could have had. But no. The trees are my children, he'd say. More than me, clearly. Poirot noted the quiver in her lip, not quite grief, not quite rage. You dined with him last night? Until 9. Then Lydia retired early, migraine. Dr. Shaw had a patient in the village. Captain Thorne patrolled the grounds. I read in the library till 10. Felicity brought cocoa at 10, Poirot mused. Sir Archibald alone thereafter. Yet this will, dated 10:45 p.m., someone joined him. A shadow in the corridor. Felicity Gray hovered, twisting her apron. Beg pardon, sir. I saw someone through the keyhole after I left the cocoa, a shadow slipping in at the study door. Tall. Then the lock turned. Key, Poirot snapped. Couldn't see, sir. Back turned. But a cane, tapping. Lydia Blackwood. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He pocketed the will and turned to the desk. The ledger lay where he'd left it. He flipped to the disputed entry. North Plantation sale, 42,000, RT. But beneath, in faint pencil, cancelled. Trust supersedes. Footsteps, deliberate, limping. Captain Thorne entered, metals clinking beneath his cardigan. Miss Gray, what's this about shadows? She shrank back. Nothing, sir, just... Enough. Thorne turned to Poirot. Sir Archibald summoned me at 10:30. Showed me the will. Made me witness it, under protest. Said the estate was bleeding money. Timber prices crashed since the war. Developers were the only buyers. Yet you initialed the sale yesterday, Poirot said mildly. Thorne flushed. His orders. Then he changed his mind, tore it up in front of me. Dr. Shaw bustled in next, bag in hand. Post-mortem's underway. Cyanide confirmed, massive dose with pine liqueur as vehicle. But he produced a glass vial, half full of brown liquid. Laudanum, from his 10 o'clock cocoa. I prescribed it myself, 2 drops for nerves. Poirot uncorked the vial, inhaled. Opium, thick and sweet, laced with sapin pine essence. To mask the laudanum? His request, Shaw said. Lungs, you see. The resin clears the chest. Poirot swirled the vial. Or confuses the palate for what follows. Cyanide smells of almonds, but pine overwhelms it. He stoppered it, handed it back. You signed the death certificate at 12:30 a.m. before examining the body. Shaw's pince-nez fogged. Routine, for the coroner. No, haste. Poirot's gaze pinned him. Why? Before Shaw could stammer, Lydia Blackwood swept in, cane stabbing the rug. Because my brother was a martyr to his lungs, Monsieur Poirot. Pine liqueur nightly, his own recipe. If it's poisoned, check the cabinet. Anyone could have tampered. Evelyn rose, fists clenched. You hated him, Aunt. He cut you out years ago after Uncle Bertram's scandal. Lydia's lips thinned to a razor's edge. Bertram was a fool. Archibald was worse, a sentimentalist. Those trees should have been felled in 1914 for the war effort. Instead, he hoarded them like a miser's gold. Poirot silenced them with raised palms. Enough. Timeline. Japp scratched his head. Clocks plural? Poirot drew the dead man's watch from his pocket. Hands frozen at 11:47, crystal cracked outward. Struck from inside the waistcoat, as was the hall clock. Someone silenced time itself. He moved to the hall clock, now propped against the study wall. With gloved fingers, he parted the pendulum bob, hollow. Inside, a single pine needle, sap sticky. He withdrew it, held it to the light. Then a second needle tumbled out, caught in his palm. 2. Thorne paled. That's impossible. Only one last night. Précisément. Poirot's voice was velvet over steel. The clock lies, and so does someone here. Evelyn's eyes darted to the safe. Lydia's cane tapped once, sharply. Shaw's hands shook on his bag. Thorne's scar throbbed. Poirot wound the clock's key, slowly, deliberately. Gears whirred. The hands twitched to 11:48. Then without warning it chimed, not 12 but 13 times, each note a brazen accusation echoing through the house. On the 13th strike, a panel in the study wainscoting slid open with a whisper of oiled wood. Beyond, darkness, thick with dust and secrets, a secret passage. Felicity screamed. Poirot peered in. Magnifique, the house breathes. Chapter 4. The Secret Passage. The panel hung open like a mouth that had forgotten how to close. Dust drifted out in lazy spirals, catching the pale morning light. Poirot produced a pocket torch, small, powerful, and shone it into the void. A narrow corridor, barely shoulder-wide, stretched into darkness. The air was colder than the grave, laced with the sour breath of old stone and something sharper. Pine resin, fresh and bleeding. Japp peered over Poirot's shoulder. Blimey? A priest's hole? No, a child's escape. Poirot stepped inside, shoes silent on the flagstones. The passage sloped downward, then leveled. Wallpaper, faded nursery print of rabbits and foxes, peeled from the walls in long, mournful strips. He advanced 10 paces, 20. A right-angle turn. Then the beam caught footprints. Small, narrow, the tread of a woman's indoor shoe. The dust was disturbed in a single line as though someone had walked in but not out. Poirot knelt. Regardez. The prints begin here. After the turn, someone entered from another door, walked to the study, and... He followed the trail backward. It ended at a dumbwaiter shaft, its rope frayed but intact. The wooden box, large enough for a tea tray or a decanter, hung at waist height. Ingénieux, he murmured. The poison delivered by pulley. The room locked, yet the murderer never inside. Japp scratched his chin. But the prints only go one way. Précisément, they return another route. Poirot shone the torch upward. A ladder, iron rungs bolted to the wall, ascended into shadow. He climbed, nimble despite his bulk, until his head brushed a trap door. He pushed. It lifted a finger's breadth, then stuck, locked from above. He descended, eyes gleaming. The nursery? We visit. They emerged into the main corridor. Felicity Gray waited, wringing her apron until the seams threatened to tear. The nursery's been locked since Miss Evelyn was 8, sir. Keys on the chatelaine. Cook has it. Fetch cook, Poirot ordered. And Miss Pine. Minutes later, the housekeeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Trelawney, unlocked the nursery door with a key the size of a dagger. The room beyond was a time capsule. Rocking horse frozen mid-gallop, dolls staring with button eyes, a child's desk scarred by ink and dreams. Dust lay thick as felt. In the center, the trap door, flush with the floorboards, secured by a brass hasp and padlock, new, gleaming. Poirot knelt, examined the hasp, scratches, fresh. Opened recently, très récemment. Evelyn entered, breath clouding in the chill. I haven't been here since, her voice caught, since Mother died. Poirot lifted the trap door. The ladder descended into the passage. On the top rung, a smear of green ink still wet. He scraped it into an envelope. The color returns, Jap called down. Footprints here too, same shoe, but now they go both ways. Poirot climbed down, followed the prints. They led to the dumbwaiter, then continued past it to a second panel, this one opening into the old still room, now a pantry. The panel was ajar. Beyond, shelves of preserves glinted like jewels. On the floor, a single pine needle crushed, its sap staining the boards amber. He returned to the nursery. On the child's desk, a drawing, pinned beneath a glass paperweight. Crayon pines stark against white paper, each trunk marked with a red X. Beneath, in childish scrawl, Daddy says they must never fall. Evelyn, aged 8. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. I drew that the day he planted the North Plantation. He kept it. Poirot's gaze softened a fraction. A promise, or a curse. Lydia Blackwood's cane announced her arrival. Sentimental nonsense. Those trees bankrupted us. She glared at the drawing. Archibald was mad for them, said they spoke to him. Dr. Shaw shuffled in, bag clutched like a shield. He had episodes, delusions of persecution, the developers, the trust, all imaginary enemies. Poirot turned. Yet the will is real, the poison is real, the passage, he gestured to the trapdoor, is real. Captain Thorne limped to the window. Outside, the snow had ceased. The world lay hushed, expectant. Tracks from the still-room door to the plantation. Dogs lost the scent in the pines. Poirot descended to the pantry. The dumbwaiter rope was slick with oil, pine oil by the scent. He hauled the box up inside a faint ring where a decanter had rested. And something else. A torn railway ticket, Exeter to Pinecombe Junction, dated yesterday. 3rd class, thumbprint in green ink on the corner. He pocketed it. Someone traveled, someone returned. Back in the nursery, he lined them up. Evelyn, Lydia, Shaw, Thorne, Felicity trembling at the rear. Écoutez. The poison entered via the dumbwaiter after the door was locked at 10. The liqueur cabinet key never left Sir Archibald's pocket. Yet the decanter was refilled with pure pine liqueur to mask the cyanide taste, then emptied to hide the dose. The murderer used the passage twice, once to deliver, once to retrieve. The railway ticket, he held it up, suggests an outsider, or an alibi shattered. Thorne's scar pulsed. I was on the terrace at 11:30, saw no one. Yet your boots carry pitch from a tree felled after midnight, Poirot countered. Evelyn's voice was ice. And Aunt Lydia's cane was in the study. Felicity saw the shadow. Lydia sneered. I was abed with vapors. Dr. Shaw can vouch. Shaw nodded too quickly. Until 11:45, then I fetched her pills from my room. Poirot's eyes narrowed. 11:35 to 11:45, 10 minutes. Enough? He knelt by the trapdoor. On the ladder's 3rd rung, a blonde hair, fine as silk, caught in a splinter. He tweezed it free, held it to the light. Blonde, he surveyed them. Evelyn, auburn, Lydia, iron gray, Felicity, mouse brown. Shaw, balding ginger. Thorne, sun-bleached sand. No match. Jap muttered, "A ghost? No, a visitor." Poirot slipped the hair into an envelope. Or a secret kept too long. He moved to the rocking horse. Beneath it, a child's boot left only, sole caked with dried mud and pine needles. Size small. Woman's. He lifted it, turned it over, inside in faded ink, EP. Evelyn gasped. "My boot. From when I was 10. I lost it in the passage playing smugglers." Poirot's smile was wintry. Smugglers. A game that became deadly. He opened the desk drawer. Inside, a brass key, matchstick-sized, identical to the one from Sir Archibald's pocket, and a folded note, new paper, green ink. "The pines will stand. Trust no one." The room stilled. Poirot pocketed the note. The game deepens. Someone plays with childhood toys and adult poisons. Felicity whimpered. "I heard the dumbwaiter twice, sir. Once at 11, once just before midnight." Poirot's torch beam swept the passage one last time. On the wall, scratched into the plaster with a childish hand. E plus F forever. He closed the panel. The nursery sealed its secrets once more. But in the corridor, the blonde hair burned in his mind like a beacon. Somewhere a woman had climbed that ladder and left her mark. Chapter 5. The Green Ink Alibi. Poirot stood in the library, a room of dark oak and darker secrets, the fire crackling like a gossip who could not be silenced. The household was assembled. Evelyn by the window, arms folded tight. Lydia in a high-backed chair, cane across her lap like a sword. Dr. Shaw beside the mantel, polishing his pince-nez with a trembling handkerchief. Captain Thorne at the door, boots removed, stockinged feet planted wide. Felicity Gray in the corner, small as a sparrow, eyes fixed on the carpet. On the mahogany table lay the evidence, arranged with Poirot's customary symmetry. The torn railway ticket, the blonde hair in its glassine envelope, the child's boot, the second brass key, the note in green ink, the 2 pine needles, the cracked watch, the hall clock's pendulum bob, hollow, guilty. And center stage, the estate ledger, open to the page of the cancelled sale. Poirot's voice cut the silence like a scalpel. "Mesdames, messieurs, we have a murder most intimate. The locked room is no longer a mystery, it is a stage. The door bolted from within, the window sealed, the snow untouched. Yet the poison arrived. The decanter was tampered with, the clocks were silenced. All by hands that knew this house as a child knows its nursery rhymes." He lifted the ledger. "Captain Thorne, you initialed a sale of the North Plantation for $42,000 yesterday. Yet Sir Archibald cancelled it, here in pencil. You witnessed the new will at 10:45 p.m., disinheriting Miss Pine. Motive enough to poison the hand that fed you?" Thorne's scar flared crimson. "He was ruining us. Timber prices are in the cellar. The estate owes $18,000 in death duties alone. I begged him to sell. Yet you walked the plantation at midnight, saw in hand, felling a tree that fell after the storm. Why? To clear the boundary, prevent trespass." His voice cracked like thin ice. Poirot turned to Evelyn. "Mademoiselle, you drew the pines with red X's at age 8. You kept the nursery key on a ribbon round your neck until you were 12. You knew the passage, the dumbwaiter, the trapdoor. The boot is yours. The note, the pines will stand, echoes your childhood vow. And the will cuts you to $500 a year. A fortune lost." Evelyn's chin lifted. "I loved him, but I won't lie, he was selling my birthright for a motorway. I forged nothing." Poirot's gaze shifted to Lydia. "Madame Blackwood, your cane was seen entering the study at 10:45. You inherit nothing under any will. Your brother called you the vulture in his diary, found this morning. You hated the trees, the estate, the very air he breathed. Lydia's laugh was dry leaves in wind. I hated his sentimentality, but I was abed. Dr. Shaw brought my pills at 11:30. Ask him. Shaw cleared his throat. I did. Then returned to my room. I was there until the alarm. Poirot lifted the railway ticket. Exeter to Pinecombe yesterday, 3rd class, thumbprint in green ink. The 4:17 arrival, witnessed by the station master. A woman veiled, blonde hair escaping her hat. She asked directions to the manor, then vanished into the snow. Who keeps green ink? He opened the ledger, a page torn out, edges ragged. Captain Thorne, your office uses green ink for accounts. This page, missing, would show double sales. Timber sold twice, once to developers, once to a fictitious mill. Embezzlement. Sir Archibald discovered it yesterday, threatened exposure. Thorne lunged for the ledger. Jap intercepted, pinning his arms. Easy, Captain. Poirot produced the torn page, recovered from the nursery grate, half burned. The figures matched. 42,000 entered twice. Initialed R.T. Thorne sagged. I needed the money. War pension doesn't cover a wooden leg and a conscience. Poirot's eyes moved to Shaw. Doctor, your fountain pen. He held out a hand. Shaw hesitated, then produced a slim Waterman emerald ink. The nib was clogged, leaking. Poirot uncapped it, dabbed the ink on blotting paper. Identical to the thumbprint, the note, the smear on the ladder. You signed the death certificate at 12:30 a.m., Poirot continued, but before rigor had set in the jaw. You knew the exact time of death, 11:47, because you stopped the clocks. You were in the study after midnight carrying a tray. Felicity saw you. Felicity nodded, tears spilling. In the corridor, sir. Tray with a cloth over it. He said it was for Sir Archibald's stomach. Shaw's face collapsed. Laudanum. I gave him laudanum at 10. He was agitated. The will, the sale. I returned at 11 to check. He was asleep. I left. Poirot lifted the tray from the evidence table. False bottom, revealed by a hidden spring. Inside, a syringe, pine oil residue, and a vial labeled KCN, potassium cyanide, medical grade. Shaw stared, horrified. That's from my surgery. I kept it for mercy. Euthanasia if the angina worsened. I swear I never... Poirot's voice was soft thunder. You removed it from your bag yesterday morning. The inventory shows it missing. You used the passage, entered via the still room, climbed the ladder, injected the cyanide into the decanter while Sir Archibald slept. Then refilled it with pure pine liqueur to mask the taste. Returned after death to empty it, plant the syringe, stop the clocks. The railway ticket, planted to suggest an outsider. The blonde hair. He held up the envelope. Synthetic, from a doll in the nursery. You tore it from the rocking horse's mane to implicate a woman, but the ink betrays you. Shaw sank to his knees. He was in pain. The trees were killing him, obsession, debt. I thought it mercy. Evelyn turned away, sobbing. Lydia's cane clattered to the floor. Thorne stared at the fire, defeated. Poirot knelt beside Shaw. Mercy does not forge alibis, doctor, nor plant evidence. You killed for the estate. To force the sale, pay the debts, save your practice. The embezzlement was the trigger. Sir Archibald confronted you both. Thorne for fraud, you for complicity. You silenced him. Jap snapped handcuffs on Shaw's wrists. Gideon Shaw, I arrest you. Poirot raised a hand. Un moment. The blonde hair is false, yes. But the railway ticket is real. Someone did arrive yesterday. And the child's boot. Size small, but the mud inside is fresh. Someone wore it last night. He turned to Felicity. Ma petite, you heard the dumbwaiter twice. You saw Dr. Shaw with the tray. But you also saw the shadow with the cane at 10:45. Madame Blackwood was abed. Whose cane was it? Felicity's whisper was barely audible. It wasn't a cane, sir. It was an umbrella. Black, furled. Captain Thorne's, he carries it for his leg. Thorne froze. Poirot's smile was terrible. Capitaine, you witnessed the will at 10:45, then returned via the passage. Umbrella as cane to mimic Madame Blackwood. You injected the poison, stopped the clocks, planted the syringe to frame the doctor. The embezzlement was yours alone. Shaw covered for you out of fear. Thorne bolted for the door. Jap tackled him, grunting. The captain fought like a cornered wolf, but the fight was brief. As Jap hauled him up, Poirot lifted the child's boot. Inside the sole, a second compartment concealed. He pressed. A click. A tiny vial rolled out, KCN, half empty. The real poison, Poirot said quietly, hidden in a child's game. The pines stand, Capitaine, but you fall. Thorne spat blood. The trees were rotten. He was rotten. I saved them all. Poirot turned away. Outside, the snow began again, soft as forgiveness, relentless as truth. But in the nursery above, the rocking horse swayed once, though no wind stirred the air. Chapter 6. The doctor's round snow had begun again, fat flakes drifting past the library windows like lazy accusations. Dr. Gideon Shaw sat handcuffed to a chair, the waterman pen, green ink dried to a crust, lying on the table like a spent bullet. Captain Thorne, wrists bound, glared from the opposite corner, the scar on his face livid against the lullaby pallor of defeat. Jap stood between them, bowler hat in hand, face the color of uncooked liver. Poirot paced, small feet silent on the Persian rug. Mes amis, we have a confession, and a lie. Captain Thorne admits the embezzlement, the poison in the child's boot, the umbrella cane disguise. Yet Dr. Shaw's syringe, his missing cyanide, his midnight tray, says dates do not fit. We have two murderers, or one murderer and one fool. He stopped before Shaw. Doctor, you say you gave laudanum at 10, returned at 11 to check, found Sir Archibald asleep. You left, yet Felicity saw you at midnight with a covered tray. Explain. Shaw's voice was a cracked whisper. I lied. I did return at 11:30. He was awake, raging about the will, said he'd expose Thorne's fraud to the trust. I calmed him with more laudanum, double dose in the cocoa. He slept. I left the tray, that's all. Poirot lifted the cocoa pot from the evidence table, cold, untouched. Yet this cocoa is pure, no laudanum. You brought a second tray, the one with the false bottom. Why? Shaw's pince-nez slipped. I don't recall. Memory is selective, Poirot murmured. Like mercy. He turned to Thorne. Capitaine, you used the passage at 10:45, injected cyanide into the decanter while Sir Archibald dozed. Laudanum already dulling his senses. You stopped the clocks at 11:47 with a blow from within the study, then exited via the dumbwaiter, leaving the child's boot as a blind. But the syringe, your fingerprints are absent. Dr. Shaw's are smudged, someone wiped it. Thorne sneered. Shaw's the chemist. He supplied the poison. Shaw shook his head violently. I kept cyanide for euthanasia, locked in my surgery. The vial in the boot is not mine, different batch. Poirot produced the two vials, one from the boot, one from Shaw's bag. Labels identical, but the boot vial's glass was thinner, foreign. Précisément. Thorne acquired his own supply, perhaps from the developer's chemist. Shaw's vial was stolen to frame him. Jap scratched his head. But the blonde hair... From the doll, Poirot finished. Planted by Thorne to suggest a woman. Yet the railway ticket is real. Someone did arrive yesterday. He moved to the fireplace where the nursery grate still held ashes of the torn ledger page. With tongs, he extracted a fragment, green ink. But the handwriting was not Thorne's, smaller, feminine. A single word, preservation. Tien's, he held it to the light. A woman's hand. And the thumbprint on the ticket, small, delicate. Evelyn, who had stood silent by the window, turned. "You're looking for a ghost, Monsieur Poirot. The only blonde here is Felicity, and she's mouse brown." Felicity whimpered. "I dyed it once, sir, for the village play." "Blonde. Sir Archibald said I looked like his late wife. Gave me a locket." She touched her throat where a silver oval glinted. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Show me." She unclasped it with shaking fingers. Inside, a miniature portrait of a young woman, golden-haired, and a curl of real hair, pale, fine, blonde. "Mademoiselle Gray," Poirot said softly. "You were in the passage, the footprints, size 4, indoor shoe, yours. The blonde hair on the ladder, yours shed in panic. You heard the dumbwaiter twice because you operated it. Once to deliver the poisoned decanter, once to retrieve it." Felicity collapsed, sobbing. "He was kind to me, said I was family. Then he proposed in the study at 11. Said he'd change the will, leave me the East Plantation. I refused. He laughed. Said I was a fool, that Evelyn would sell it all. I ran. But I came back. With Thorne's poison," Poirot finished. "He gave you the vial, the plan. You used the passage you knew from childhood games with Miss Pine. You injected the cyanide while Sir Archibald slept, stopped the clocks to confuse the time of death, planted Shaw's syringe to frame him. Thorne provided the alibi, claiming he saw no one on the terrace while you both worked inside." Thorne lunged against his bonds. "Liar! She acted alone!" Felicity's voice rose, shrill. "You said the trees would die. You said we'd save them together. You gave me the boot, said it was a joke, a childhood memory. You used me." Poirot lifted the child's boot. Inside the secret compartment, not just the vial, but a second note in Thorne's hand. "Do it at 11:30. I'll handle the clocks." Jap whistled. A conspiracy. Thorne masterminded, Felicity executed, Shaw scapegoated. Shaw sagged. "I suspected Thorne's fraud. He threatened to ruin me if I spoke. When the cyanide went missing, I thought he'd use it on himself." Poirot turned to Evelyn. "Mademoiselle, you knew the passage. You drew the pines with red X's. Yet you said nothing." Evelyn's face was stone. "I haven't entered the nursery in 20 years. Felicity was my playmate. She knew every inch. I thought her loyal." Lydia Blackwood's cane tapped once. "The girl's a fool, but the captain, he's the rot at the heart." Poirot knelt before Felicity. "Ma petite, why?" She looked up, tears carving channels through dust on her cheeks. "He said the pines were sacred, that Sir Archibald was selling them to be pulped for newspapers, that if I loved him, loved the trees, I'd stop it. He said it was mercy." Poirot rose. "Mercy is not murder. Captain Thorne, you embezzled, you poisoned, you corrupted a child's devotion. Dr. Shaw, you concealed fraud, provided the means. Felicity, you pulled the rope." He signaled Jap. "Arrest them all. Conspiracy to murder." As the constables moved, Felicity suddenly screamed, "The locket! He gave me the locket to hide the will!" She tore it open. Inside, behind the portrait, a folded slip, the real will, leaving the estate to Felicity Gray, natural daughter of Archibald Pine. Dated yesterday, witnessed by Thorne. The room froze. Poirot's voice was quiet thunder. Mon Dieu, the motive was not preservation, it was inheritance. Sir Archibald's secret child acknowledged at last. Thorne discovered it, used it, twisted it. He would control the heiress and the fortune. Felicity stared at the paper, horrified. He said it was a game, that I'd be safe. Thorne laughed, bitter. "She'd have signed anything. The trees, the money, mine." Jap hauled him up. "You'll hang, Captain." But Poirot's gaze was on the fireplace. The ashes stirred, though no wind blew. A final fragment fluttered out. Green ink, a child's scrawl, Daddy's secret. He pocketed it. "The round is complete. But the game... He glanced at the ceiling where the nursery lay silent. The game is not yet over. Outside, the snow fell thicker, erasing footprints, sealing secrets. But in the library, the fire crackled on, and the clocks, both broken, would never strike again. Chapter 7. The Blonde Betrayal. The library had become a cage. Snow pressed against the windows like a living thing, muffling the world outside. Dr. Shaw sat slumped, handcuffs glinting. Captain Thorne stood rigid between two constables, the scar on his face a white slash. Felicity Gray knelt on the rug, the locket open in her lap, the secret will trembling in her fingers. Jap wiped sweat from his brow despite the chill. Poirot alone moved, circling the evidence table with the precision of a watchmaker. He lifted the will, thin paper, green ink, Thorne's witness signature bold beside Sir Archibald's spidery scrawl. Naturellement, he murmured. The final twist. Not preservation, not embezzlement, not even greed alone, but blood. Felicity Gray, née Pine, illegitimate daughter, acknowledged in extremis. The estate passes to her. Captain Thorne controls the puppet. The trees fall to the developers after all. Felicity's sob was raw. He said it was love. That uncle-father wanted me safe. That the will was my birthright. Thorne's laugh was a bark. She was a means, nothing more. The old man doted on her, blonde like his dead wife. I saw the letters, the locket, the nursery games. When he rewrote the will, I knew. She'd inherit everything. I'd marry her, sell the timber, pay my debts clean. Poirot's eyes were green ice. You forged nothing. You used the truth. Sir Archibald discovered your fraud yesterday, confronted you at 10:30. You persuaded him to acknowledge Felicity, thinking to control her. He agreed, on condition the trees went to the trust. You could not allow it. So you poisoned him, framed Shaw, used the child's devotion. He turned to Felicity. Ma petite. You operated the dumbwaiter. You injected the cyanide at 11:30, believing it mercy. You planted the syringe, the doll's hair, the railway ticket. But the clocks, both stopped by, a blow from within. You are small. You could not reach the hall clock's face. Thorne struck it from the terrace ladder, entered via the still room, stopped the watch in the struggle. You were his hands inside. Felicity nodded, broken. He said the clocks must lie. That time would protect us. Jap snapped cuffs on her wrists. Felicity Gray, accessory to murder. But Poirot raised a hand. Un moment. The blonde hair on the ladder, real, not dolls. Tested under microscope this morning. Human, bleached. Not yours, mademoiselle. Yours is natural, dark at the roots. Someone else climbed that ladder. He produced the envelope, the single strand glowing like gold in the firelight. And the railway ticket. Thumbprint small, but the nail varnish trace, rose. No one here wears rose varnish. Evelyn stepped forward, voice steady. Then who? Poirot's gaze swept them. The betrayal is deeper. Someone knew the passage, the locket, the will before it was signed. Someone blonde, someone trusted. He moved to the fireplace, lifted the tongs, and extracted a final ash fragment. Green ink, a woman's hand. Meet me nursery 11:15, trust deed ready. Signed L. Lydia Blackwood's cane clattered to the floor. That's not mine. Poirot held up her glove, left hand inside cuff-stained rose. Madame, you dyed your hair blonde in 1919, photograph in the hall, your wedding. Gray now, but the roots betray you. You arrived yesterday on the 417 veiled. You met Thorne in the nursery, planned the murder. You knew of Felicity's birth. Your brother confided in you years ago. You hated the trees, the estate, the scandal. With Felicity heir, Thorne your puppet, you'd force the sale. Take your share. Lydia's face crumpled. He cut me out. After Bertram's disgrace, he said I was poison. I came to beg. Thorne offered partnership. Felicity was the key. Poirot's voice was soft steel. You climbed the ladder at 11:15, left the hair. You struck the hall clock from the terrace. Your cane doubles as a hook. You stopped the watch when Sir Archibald woke, struggled. Thorne injected the poison. Felicity, innocent, operated the dumbwaiter, thinking to save the trees. You all betrayed the child. Thorne lunged. She's lying. It was her idea, Lydia sneered. You needed my key to the nursery. You needed my silence. Shaw stirred. I suspected Lydia, saw her on the terrace at 11:40, said nothing, my cowardice. Poirot lifted the locket. Inside, behind the will, a second compartment. He pressed. A click. A tiny photograph. Lydia, blonde, young, arm in arm with Sir Archibald. On the back, to my sister, my secret keeper. A. The betrayal began decades ago, Poirot said. Sir Archibald loved you, incestuous perhaps. You bore Felicity in secret, gave her to the maid's family. He acknowledged her too late. You used her, as Thorne used her, as the trees were used. Felicity screamed, tearing free of Jap. She flew at Lydia, nails raking. You're my mother? Jap restrained her. Lydia wept, suddenly old. I had no choice. Scandal would have ruined us. Poirot turned away. The blonde betrayal is complete. 3 murderers, 1 child, 1 estate. The pines stand because the trust deed was signed at 11 noon before the poison. Found this morning in the safe's false bottom. Sir Archibald's last act. Preservation. He opened the deed. Signed, witnessed by the village solicitor, delivered by hand yesterday. The estate untouchable. Evelyn's voice was wonder. He saved them after all. Thorne sagged. Rotten to the end. Jap hauled them out. Thorne, Lydia, Shaw, Felicity weeping in a constable's arms. The library emptied, leaving Poirot alone with the evidence. He lifted the child's boot. Inside the soul, a final secret. He pressed. A spring. A phonograph cylinder rolled out, miniature, wax. He carried it to the gramophone in the corner, wound the crank. Sir Archibald's voice, faint but clear. If you hear this, I'm dead. The pines are safe, trust deed signed. Felicity, my daughter, forgive me. Lydia, my sin. Thorne, my betrayer. The truth is in the clocks. Poirot stopped the cylinder. The fire crackled. Outside, the snow ceased. He returned to the table, lifted the hall clock's pendulum bob. Inside, a second cylinder, identical. He played it. Silence. Then a child's voice. Felicity, aged 8. Daddy, tell me the pines will never fall. Sir Archibald. Never, my love. They are eternal. Poirot closed his eyes. The betrayal was complete, but the pines stood. He pocketed the cylinders, adjusted his muffler, and stepped into the corridor. The house was silent, the clocks forever still. But in the nursery above, the rocking horse swayed once more, though no wind stirred the air. Chapter 8. The Voice from the Grave. Silence settled over Pinecrest Manor like a shroud freshly laundered. The snow had stopped. The world outside the library windows lay in a hush of white, every branch and blade of grass encased in crystal. The fire had burned low, embers pulsing like a dying heart. Poirot stood alone at the evidence table, the 2 phonograph cylinders side by side. One bore Sir Archibald's final testament, the other a child's plea from 20 years past. He turned them in his gloved hands, the wax cool and smooth. Jap re-entered, rubbing chapped hands. All 4 in the cells at the village station. Lydia's screaming for her solicitor. Thorne's gone quiet, dangerous quiet. Shaw's asking for laudanum. Felicity won't speak at all. He glanced at the cylinders. What now, Poirot? Now, Poirot said. We listen to the dead man walk. He carried the first cylinder to the gramophone, set the needle, and wound the crank. The room filled with the crackle of static, then Sir Archibald's voice, thin, urgent, recorded in haste. "If you hear this, I am murdered. The trust deed is signed, delivered to Mr. Carstairs at the bank by hand at noon yesterday. The Pines are safe. Felicity, my daughter, forgive your father's silence. Lydia, my sin is yours too. Thorn, you will hang for this. The truth is in the clocks. Look to the recording cut off mid-word, needle-scratching wax. Poirot lifted the second cylinder, the child's. He played it again, Felicity's voice piping and clear. "Daddy, tell me the Pines will never fall." Sir Archibald, tender. "Never, my love, they are eternal, stronger than us." Poirot stopped the machine. "Écoutez, the clocks. Both stopped at 11:47, both struck from within. The hall clock's pendulum bob held the child's cylinder. The watch." He produced Sir Archibald's gold hunter, crystal cracked outward. "Held the adults." He pried open the watch's back with a penknife. Inside the case, wedged beside the mechanism, a third cylinder no larger than a thimble. He fitted it to the gramophone's mandrel with delicate fingers. The voice that emerged was Sir Archibald's, but altered, gasping, recorded in the study itself moments before death. "Thorn, you fool. The will is a decoy. Felicity inherits nothing. The trust, cough, is ironclad. Lydia, you sold your own child. The cyanide I tasted, our Pines, eternal." A thud, then silence. Poirot's mustaches bristled. Recorded at 11:47 exactly, the blow that stopped the clocks also started the cylinder. Sir Archibald knew he was poisoned, spoke his accusation into the watch's hidden microphone. Thorn struck the final blow to silence him. Jap whistled. "A dying declaration, enough to hang them all." "Oui, but the decoy will—" "Why?" Poirot paced. "To flush the killers." Sir Archibald suspected betrayal. He staged the disinheriting will, let Thorn witness it, knowing greed would act. The real trust deed, signed earlier, delivered to the bank. The Pines were never in danger. He returned to the evidence table, lifted the child's boot. Inside the secret soul compartment. A final surprise. He pressed. A spring. A folded slip of paper fluttered out. Bank stationery, dated yesterday, trust deed received and filed, Pines preserved in perpetuity. A. Pine. Poirot smiled, small and terrible. The voice from the grave speaks clearly, but one voice is missing. He moved to the fireplace where the nursery grate still held secrets. With tongs, he extracted a final fragment, charred wax, green ink. A label. Cylinder 4 LB. "Lydia Blackwood," he murmured. She recorded her own confession. He searched the gramophone's cabinet, found a hidden drawer. Inside, a fourth cylinder intact. He played it. Lydia's voice, cold as winter iron. "Archibald confronted me at 11:15 in the nursery. Said he'd acknowledged Felicity, left her everything. I laughed. Told him Thorn and I had planned it years ago. That the girl would sign the sale the moment she inherited. He raged. Said the trust was already signed. I struck him with my cane. Thorn entered then, injected the cyanide. We stopped the clocks. The child pulled the dumbwaiter rope, thinking it mercy. We used her, my own daughter. God forgive me." The recording ended with a sob. Poirot stopped the needle. Voila, the blonde betrayal complete. Lydia, mother, sister, murderer. Thorn, puppet master. Felicity, pawn. Shaw, accomplice after the fact. Jap shook his head. "But the railway ticket. Lydia arrived yesterday?" "Oui." Veiled blonde wig from her theatrical days. She left the ticket in the dumbwaiter to suggest an outsider. The rose varnish on the thumbprint, hers, from a bottle in her room. The hair on the ladder, wig fibers. She climbed to the nursery, struck the first blow, left the cane mark Felicity saw through the keyhole. He opened the nursery drawing, the pines with red X's. Beneath the paperweight, a fifth cylinder, child-sized. He played it, Felicity's voice yesterday, trembling. Captain Thorne says Daddy's selling the trees, that I must stop him. That the poison is mercy, I'm scared. But the pines must stand. Poirot's eyes closed. Recorded in innocence. Thorne gave her the cylinder, told her to hide it in the boot. Insurance. If she turned on him. Jap muttered, diabolical. Précisément. Poirot gathered the cylinders into a leather case. 5 voices. 1 truth. The pines stand because Sir Archibald outwitted them all. The decoy will, the hidden recordings, the trust deed delivered before the poison touched his lips. He died, but the forest lives. He moved to the window. Dawn bled rose over the ridge, gilding the snow-laden pines. They stood in perfect ranks, black against white, eternal. But the human heart, Poirot said softly, is not so resilient. He turned to Jap. The coroner may have the body. The bank has the deed. The police have the killers. Hercule Poirot has the truth. Jap hesitated. Will Felicity hang? Poirot's gaze was distant. She was 16 when Lydia bore her, 19 now. A child used by adults. The jury may show mercy. The pines will not. He lifted the hall clock's pendulum bob, hollow, innocent now. Inside, etched in tiny letters, for F, my eternal forest. Poirot closed the bob. The voice from the grave is silent. The trees speak for themselves. He stepped into the corridor. The house exhaled, relieved of its burden. Somewhere a floorboard sighed, but this time it was only the settling of old bones. In the nursery, the rocking horse stood still. The dolls stared with button eyes. The drawing of the pines with red X's fluttered in a draft that had no source. Poirot paused at the threshold, adjusted his muffler, and left the manor without looking back. The snow had begun to melt. Water dripped from the eaves like tears too late. Behind him, the pines stood sentinel, roots deep in the earth, branches reaching for a sky that would never cut them down. Chapter 9. The symmetry of guilt. Snowmelt dripped from the eaves of Pinecrest Manor, striking the gravel like slow, deliberate applause. The house stood stripped of its secrets, its corridors echoing with the absence of footsteps. The police van had gone, taking Lydia Blackwood, Captain Thorne, Dr. Shaw, and Felicity Gray to the cells at Tavistock. Only the pines remained, black and unyielding against a sky the color of tarnished pewter. Hercule Poirot stood in the study, the scene of the crime now a stage emptied of actors. The desk had been cleared, the decanter removed, the tumbler sealed in evidence. The wallpaper safe gaped open, its false will a crumpled relic. The hall clock lay on its side, pendulum bob removed, the child's cylinder nestled in cotton wool within Poirot's case. The watch, too, was silent, its final accusation recorded and filed. He surveyed the room one last time, eyes lingering on the window. The snow beneath it had melted into a perfect circle as though the earth itself had exhaled. No footprints, no disturbance. The locked room had kept its promise. The murder had come from within the house, from within the family. Jap entered, stamping slush from his boots. Coroner's finished. Cyanide massive dose ingested between 11:30 and 11:45. The recordings are with the superintendent, enough to hang the lot of them thrice over. Poirot nodded. Oui, but justice is not symmetry. We must assemble them once more for the final act. He had arranged it with the precision of a chess master. The suspects were brought back under guard, the library transformed into a courtroom of oak and firelight. Lydia sat rigid, veil discarded, gray hair stark against her black bombazine. Thorne stood between constables, scar livid, eyes dead. Shaw hunched, spectacles fogged with breath. Felicity knelt, wrists bound, the locket gone, her face a child's again, lost, terrified. Evelyn Pine entered last, cloak over her shoulders, the only one free. She had been cleared. No passage dust on her hems, no green ink on her fingers, no blonde hair to shed. She took her place by the window, auburn hair catching the fire's glow. Poirot stood at the evidence table, the 5 cylinders arranged in a perfect pentagon. He addressed them not as prisoners, but as pieces on his board. But one thread remains, the why of the blonde. Lydia's wig, yes. The railway ticket, yes. But the hair on the ladder, real, bleached, rose-varnished thumbprint. Someone else climbed. He lifted the nursery drawing, the pines with red X's. Beneath it, the 5th cylinder. He played it one last time. Felicity's child voice, trembling. Captain Thorne says Daddy's selling the trees. I must stop him. The poison is mercy. I'm scared, but the pines must stand. Poirot stopped the needle. Recorded yesterday, 3 p.m. Thorne gave her the cylinder, told her to hide it in the boot. Insurance. But the boot... He lifted the child's left boot, sole caked with fresh mud and pine pitch. Was worn last night. Size 4, but the mud is from the East Plantation, 2 miles away, felled at midnight. Felicity was in the passage. Someone else walked the forest. Evelyn stepped forward, voice steady. The tracks I saw at dawn, leading away from the house, then circling back. I thought them Thorne's, but his boots were pitched from the boundary fence, west. These tracks went east. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément. Someone left after the murder, returned before dawn. Someone with access to the passage, the nursery, the boot. Someone who knew the trust deed was safe but wanted the killers caught. He turned to the fireplace. The grate had been swept, but one fragment remained. Charred paper, green ink, a child's scrawl. I did it for the pines. Tell Monsieur Poirot. Felicity gasped. That's my writing, but I never... Poirot knelt, lifted the fragment with tweezers. Written in haste after the murder, hidden in the grate to be found. The writer climbed the ladder after the killers left, planted the hair, the ticket, the note, ensured the symmetry of guilt. He faced them. The true avenger was not among the murderers. It was the one person who loved the pines more than blood. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. Me? But I... Poirot's smile was gentle. Non, mademoiselle. You were in the library all night, witnessed by the butler bringing cocoa at 11:50, but you knew the passage. You drew the pines with red X's. You kept the nursery key on a ribbon now in your jewelry box, pitch-stained. You walked the East Plantation at midnight, felled a tree to match Thorne's alibi, left the boot as evidence. You planted the hair, your own, bleached for the village play years ago, kept in a locket you gave Felicity. You wrote the note, burned the ledger page, ensured the cylinders were found. Evelyn's voice shook. He was my uncle. My father in all but name. He taught me the trees were sacred. When I found the decoy will, I knew Thorne planned murder. I let it happen, watched from the passage, recorded nothing. But when Felicity pulled the rope, I acted. I made sure they'd hang. The pines would stand. Poirot's voice was soft thunder. You became the axe you feared. You preserved the forest by sacrificing your soul. Jap stepped forward, cuffs ready. Evelyn did not resist. The trees live, she whispered. So do I. She bolted for the window, glass shattering, snow exploding inward. Jap lunged, tackled her in the drift. The left boot flew off, revealing the duplicate study key taped to her ankle. Poirot stood over her, snowflakes melting on his mustaches. Mademoiselle, you underestimated the little gray cells. The phonograph cylinder in the nursery, scratched with your hairpin found in the passage. The railway ticket, planted by you to implicate Lydia. The green ink, stolen from the office to forge the ledger tear. All to make Thorne the scapegoat. You used Felicity's devotion, Lydia's greed, Shaw's fear. You orchestrated the symmetry. Evelyn spat snow. The forest was dying. He'd have clear-cut it for a motorway. I saved it. Poirot's eyes were winter. You clear-cut a life. There is no symmetry in that. The constables hauled her up. The library emptied once more. 5 killers now. 1 forest preserved. Poirot stood alone. The cylinders in his case, the pines outside standing sentinel. The fire had died to ash. He adjusted his muffler, stepped into the corridor. The house was silent, the clocks forever still. But in the nursery the rocking horse rocked once, though no wind stirred the air. Chapter 10. The peril resolved. The library windows stood shattered, a jagged mouth letting in the wind. Snow swirled across the Persian rug like white ash. Evelyn Pine lay face down in the drift outside, wrists cuffed, auburn hair plastered to her cheeks with meltwater. Jap hauled her to her feet. The duplicate study key glinted on the snow where her boot had flown. Poirot stepped through the broken frame, coat collar turned up, shoes leaving perfect half-moons in the virgin crust. "Mademoiselle," he said quietly, "the pines are saved." But the cost was a human forest. Evelyn's laugh was brittle ice. 1 life for 1,000 trees, a fair exchange. Poirot knelt, retrieved the key with a silk handkerchief. This opened the study after midnight. You entered via the terrace, struck the hall clock from the ladder, stopped the watch in the struggle. You planted the hairpin, the forged note, the bleached hair. You let Felicity pull the rope, let Thorne inject the poison, let Lydia believe she controlled the board. Then you walked the east plantation, felled a tree to match the pitch on Thorne's boots, left the child's boot as your signature. You orchestrated every clue so the little gray cells would see them, never you. She met his gaze, defiant. "Uncle taught me symmetry, I gave him perfection." Jap snapped the cuffs tighter. "Evelyn Pine, I arrest you for the murder of Sir Archibald Pine." The constables formed a cordon. Lydia, Thorne, Shaw, Felicity, already loaded into the van, stared through the frosted windows. 5 killers, 1 manor, 1 forest preserved. Poirot turned to the house. The study door stood open. Sunlight slanted across the desk, illuminating the empty space where the decanter had rested. He entered, case in hand, and placed the 5 cylinders in a neat row. He wound the gramophone one last time. Sir Archibald's dying voice filled the room. "The pines, eternal." Poirot stopped the needle. He opened the safe's false bottom, removed the true trust deed, signed, sealed, delivered to the bank at noon yesterday. Ironclad. The National Trust would take possession within the week. The pines would stand for centuries. He climbed the main staircase, boots creaking on oak. Portraits glared down, pines in periwigs, pines with shotguns, pines with secrets. At the nursery door he paused. The rocking horse stood still. The doll's button eyes reflected the pale light. The drawing of the pines with red X's lay on the desk, the paperweight removed. Beneath it, a final note in Evelyn's hand, green ink. "The forest lives. Forgive me." Poirot pocketed it. He opened the trapdoor, descended the ladder into the passage. Dust lay undisturbed now. The dumbwaiter rope hung slack. On the wall, the childish scrawl, E+F forever, had been scratched deeper, the plaster scarred as though with a hairpin. He emerged in the still room, crossed to the exterior door. Outside, the snow had melted into runnels. The east plantation tracks were gone, washed away. But the felled tree remained. A single spruce cut clean, its stump bleeding resin. Poirot touched the sap, still tacky. He scraped a sample into an envelope. Back in the study, he assembled the household staff. Mrs. Trelawney, the butler, the scullery maid. "Mes amis, the manor passes to the trust. You will be retained. The pines will employ you still." Mrs. Trelawney curtsied, eyes wet. Sir Archibald would have liked that. Poirot returned to the library. Jap waited by the fire, which had been rekindled. Van's ready. Superintendent wants you at the station. Statements, recordings, the lot. Poirot nodded. He opened his case, arranged the evidence, cylinders, keys, notes, vials, the child's boot. He added the final envelope, sap from the East Plantation. Labeled EP, 12:15 a.m. Symmetry, he murmured. The left boot flown off in the snow, the right boot, found this morning in the boiler room soaked in pine oil to silence the dumbwaiter rope. Evelyn's footprint in pitch, size 6, not 4. She wore the child's boot over her own, left the small prints in the passage, the large ones outside. The perfect disguise, Jap whistled. DIY, she played us all. None, she played them. The killers hanged themselves on her clues. The pines were never the peril. The peril was the human heart, rotting from within yet capable of such meticulous preservation. He closed the case. Outside, the police van's engine coughed to life. The prisoners' faces pressed against the windows, Lydia weeping, Thorne staring, Shaw broken, Felicity blank, Evelyn calm. Poirot boarded the return motor with Jap. The Wolseley crawled down the drive, chains clinking. Pinecrest Manor receded in the mirror. Black beams, white plaster, chimneys exhaling the last of their warmth. The pines stood in perfect ranks, branches heavy with melting snow, roots deep in the earth. At the gates, a trust placard already waited. Pinecrest Plantation, National Trust property. Public access, spring 1931. Poirot adjusted his muffler. Mon ami, the case is closed. The forest breathes, the house is silent. Jap glanced back. Think they'll hang her? Poirot's eyes were on the pines. The jury will see a niece who saved a dynasty. They may spare her. The trees will not care. The car breasted the ridge. Dawn bled gold over the valley, gilding the spruce tops. Somewhere, a clock that would never strike again chimed 13 in memory. Poirot smiled, small and sad. Les arbres gagnent toujours. The trees always win. The motor vanished into the moorland mist, leaving Pinecrest Manor to its eternal guardians. The pines, black against white, standing sentinel over a secret no longer buried.